All right, we are recording. Awesome, awesome. So, definitely want to welcome everyone for listening, whether you're listening on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcast. Want to thank you for lending us your ears, and I want to thank our guest today, Irby Pace, for calling in from Houston to give us a little bit about his backstory and career in design. So, my name is Austin. I'm one of the community and partnership managers here at LottieFiles, and I am, of course, your host for LottieSpaces. So, my guest here, Irby, is an experienced, what I would call veteran motion designer and also a Lottie evangelist located in Houston, Texas. And I'm calling in from Chicago. So this is the first time I've actually been in the same time zone as somebody that we're doing this at. It's usually like super early in the morning for me or like super late at night. So this is pretty cool here. So the purpose of Lottie Spaces is simply to foster great discussion and have an exchange of ideas to help designers build epic careers by listening to stories of designers that have obviously built epic careers. So the format is super simple. It's straightforward. We're going to do some background introductions, build some context around what we're going to talk about today. Then we're going to dive into some discussion questions, and then we'll finish it off with some closing questions and some call to actions for the audience. So I'll give a more in-depth introduction, and then I'll let Irby introduce himself. But we've got motion design here. We've got video editing. We've got character animation. We've got cinematography. We've got motion branding and everything else under the sun. So I think this is going to be a great conversation. But I would love for you, Irby, to introduce yourself to the audience and tell us about, because I call this the hero backstory, right? Everybody loves a good hero backstory. So I would love for you to just tell us about your background. Where did you grow up? How did you grow up? And how do you think the way that you grew up shaped you into the person that you are today?
Hey, thanks for having me, Austin. It's great to be here. Thanks for taking this time to meet with me. Um, so about my background, I grew up in like West Texas, so out in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nothing. And I just always longed and strived for like more. Like I always wanted to like go further and see further and be in and just go out and explore and things like that. I remember growing up watching on cable, watching like anime and stuff like that, and just being like, this is amazing. I've never seen animation like this before in my entire life. I don't know what I'm seeing right now. And then like as I've gotten older, you know, that stuff just gained in popularity as I've gotten older. And but I'm still a big fan of just like the classic cartoons out there. A lot of cartoons still. I think animation is just like one of those things that like it just bridges, it just goes beyond, you know, it communication boundaries and things like that. It's just universal, just like movies and television. It kind of like it kind of hits on so many different levels that like people can understand it and relate to it, and it can really speak to different ideas. So like I always say I grew up in like the wrong time, because like if I was, you know, 18 right now, you know, with as many things that we have available to us as designers and animators and things like that, and the access and the level of like software access and computer access, it's kind of crazy. I went to, you know, I graduated high school, went to college, like learned a lot about photography because it was like the closest thing I could find to like, you know, like how do you frame things? How do you like compose? How do you make images? How do you do these things? And it was something that I was very fascinated with. And I was always doing like video work when I was like kind of in school for that. And we're talking like early video, like D cameras. You'd have to record it in
VHS where you gotta
yeah. It was bad. It was kind of like, if you ever seen the Goldbergs, it was kind of like that. It was bad kind of stuff. You know, really bad video that I would never show anybody today. But it was, you know, you're just, for me, it was like just learning and trying and just pushing. And that's something that like I'll probably reference back to like 1,000 times as we talk today, just like pushing forward and trying. But my video experience while I was in school led me to being able to get a job at an NBC affiliate out in West Texas. And so I started working with video editing on like better rig systems. So I was using like Avid, and Adobe stuff, of course, like Photoshop and all these other things. But I started learning After Effects there too, and I was just like blown completely away by like that software. It was just like, you'd still have to like 10-second clip, 10-second animation would still take you a whole weekend to render, but it was something that like it was still kind of like worth the wait. You'd come in on a Monday and like what do I have waiting for me? Oh, it crashed. But it's one of those things where it was just eye-opening, and the experience was there, and you just really cut your teeth like on learning how to do these things in such like older machines that couldn't really handle it. And then I really loved the idea of like when I was in school, I would really love the idea of like showing and teaching and like communicating ideas. And so I wanted to become a teacher. So I ran off to finish my bachelor degree at Texas Tech. And then from there, I went to graduate school at University of North Texas, so I can just, become a professor maybe one day and like teach, at like higher education level. I loved that idea of like teaching photography and video and animation. And so when I got out of graduate school, I was just teaching for a little while and got a full-time teaching gig. During Texas Tech, I was also working at another NBC, and I was just even more creative stuff on the side. There, like we had like creative agency, we had like the news agency side of things, and it's just I was writing, I was editing, I was shooting, I was just doing kind of everything. That's kind of like that's been my thing, is like I just kind of hit everything. And when I was teaching kind of everything too. I was teaching photography, I was teaching video, I was teaching animation. Then we had like a pandemic just like spring up on us, and and I was like, oh man, like the school was like, we don't know what's going to happen. We're not giving, we're not renewing contracts. So I had like a year left on a contract. I decided I'm going to go back out into the freelance world. I'm going to go back into the animation world. It was something I've always really wanted to just really push further into. And I just started rebuilding that animation work, rebuilding my video work, building out better reels and better projects, and just started landing clients. I started like, my friend turned me on to the idea of Upwork, so I was on there. And that was the first time I ever heard of Lottie. There was a client that needed some Lottie animations done, and I was like, oh, let me go check this out. And I looked it up, and I looked at all the like things you could do with it. Just like heavily researched the platform, heavily researched what they were doing. And I was like, this is awesome. And I started just getting into it and doing some animations for some clients. That led me to like working with like Sony, one of their gaming studios, with the Call of Duty guys, Jason and Dave. They started a game studio called Deviation Studios, and they did a website. It was mostly like kind of a recruiting website, but it was like kind of showing how fun they were. And I got to do, there was like, they wanted all these Lottie animations for it. And I was like, I could do it. And like, it just kind of like, it was like one of the things, it just kept spiraling and spiraling. And I say spiral in a good way. It kept like snowballing, I guess is a better term. And I got into doing those things, which led me to, I was working in a medical company doing animation for them, and then I landed for a job at TaxFile, where I was doing all of their Lottie animations for the website. And up until like last September, I was employed with them, and then this got let go of. And so I've just kind of been freelancing since then, looking for work and things like that. But Lottie reached out to me because I was on their forums constantly, like helping people problem solve like all of their Lottie animations, because I'd gotten into it so deep that I just like understood the platform, understood what it needed to be done, how to like fix all these, how to problem solve. And it was just like the teacher in me. It was just like, let me fix, let me help, let me guide, let me mentor, let me get to that thing. And they invited me to become an evangelist, which I've just been just so like honored to be a part of that program, and being able to like continually like I'm on, and I got onto the Discord, and I'm on the Slack, and so I am just constantly like helping or feedbacking, or sometimes someone will send me like their After Effects file, like I can't figure this out, and I'm like, okay, let me look at it. I take a look at it, and I end up sending it back to them. I've conferenced with people all over the world about like their Lottie animations, and been able to just reach out and meet so many different people in different fields and help problem solve, fix, and animate, and just do a ton of things. It's been awesome.
Yeah, that's honestly one of the best stories I've heard. I love how you touched on, because I feel like when people are listening to this, right, they may be at different points in their journey, right? They may be at the post-grad journey, or they may be at the, mid-career, or maybe, getting to that veteran stage. And at each point in that story, you kind of talked about how you navigated through that. And I think people will definitely resonate with that wherever they're at in their journey, and they'll say, hey, like, there's a person just like me that went through these trials and tribulations, and they made it out on the other side. So I would actually like you to focus on, at what point did you really feel like a designer, and maybe also talk about some hurdles that you overcame that helped you feel that internally, because from what I'm hearing, right, you started out doing something like animation, and then photography and things like that before you really got into design. So I would love to know, and I'm sure the people listening would love to know, at what point did you really start, putting on your resume, like, I'm a designer, and maybe were there some trials and tribulations that you overcame that you were like, yes, like, this is the point to where I'm finally in this career?
I think I'm always overcoming that, because I mean, it's an imposter syndrome thing where I continuously self-doubt myself, and this is who I am as a person. I will do something and I'm like, I'm not sure about this, and then people love it, or I get great feedback on it, and it's like something I'm constantly like. I think I told someone on an interview the other day, I was like, I don't want to be wading in water. I want to be surfing and like moving forward. And that kind of is like kind of my mojo or mantra to that is like don't be comfortable, like always be pushing, always be striving, because I mean, it's just the design trends change every year, when it comes to animation, one person will do something and then you'll see like 1,000 copies of it. And it's just like, just being aware and on top of things. And, I think even today, putting designer on my resume or motion graphics designer on my resume, it still always comes with that asterisk of like, I can always still do better. So I think it's just like, it's something that like, you're always just trying to chasing that next thing. And then you look back at your work and you're like, wow, like, I can't believe I did this, and I can't believe I did that. And you're always learning and you're always improving. And I think if you're ever at a point where you're not, you really need to challenge yourself a lot more, I think, or find ways to challenge yourself, because that's just been that's kind of always been like my thing, is like just pushing and learning and like just not being static. I think, it's easy to be static.
Oh yeah.
It's comfortable, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, and it's easy and it's reliable. But I think for me, I'm just always just in this like mode of like, I want to push and push further and just keep going that extra limit, that extra mile. And I don't even know if ever in the future that, like, I would ever not be the imposter syndrome situation. But I think it just happens. I think it just happens to everybody in the field.
Yeah. You said a couple of things that I wanted to touch on there. So one, design trends and how they pertain to, being competitive in your career field. We'll touch on that later. But I want to first touch on mentorship and community, because I think, especially when when we're talking about the evolution of the internet, right? Online forums and online communities, they weren't as prevalent as they were today. And obviously today, a lot of people get mentorship through them. They get a lot of inspiration, whether it's just following somebody on Twitter or YouTube or whatever the case may be. So I want to ask you, what did mentorship look like for you in your journey? Were you kind of like a lone wolf, where you kind of had to, learn things on your own, or did you have some type of community to push you along? And like you said, not remain static?
It's a little bit of column A and column B on that situation. When I was working in television, and I say we as in like the editors and stuff, we collectively kind of came together and said, how do we solve these situations? How do we figure out how to do these things? And that was kind of like what you had, right? You didn't like, YouTube wasn't there at the time. you know, like that. And if you can imagine like what it's like to not have that on, like have that resource, it's insane to think about like how that resource has grown to what it is now versus like where it was beforehand. And you know, it's like we would have to either go to conferences, we would have to go do training somewhere, you know, like we'd have to travel to Dallas and we'd have to like do, or do a conference or something like that to learn more about a specific thing. And that was kind of like what you had to do before. And now you can just, I can just make a YouTube video and I can just show you how to do one aspect of like, for example, Lottie animation, or I can show you how to do something with After Effects. And people have built entire careers on YouTube by just doing that specific thing. I think it's just, at this point, it's so much, it's kind of like, then how do you find it? You know, like it's so much content out there. It's like, how do you filter it? And it's just like, stuff like Reddit is really great for the After Effects forum there, because people constantly jump on there like, I don't know how to even get started in this. Everybody's like, watch this YouTube video, watch this YouTube video series, or watch this person on YouTube. And it's just like, and it just leads to that. And forums now, I think even with like Adobe, it's more troubleshooting situational things than it used to be, like how to do specific types of animations. I think Reddit's kind of taken that over because it's so quick. There's just a larger user base there, and they're connected. And if you go where the users are, you're going to get more results. And I think that's kind of what it's been like for me to even like figure out how to like do specific things, or even provide mentorship or like help or problem solving, is like going where the users are and going where that's happening. And when I was growing up, I was just like, I had to teach myself, right? Like I had to teach myself After Effects. I had to teach myself like Premiere. I had to teach myself how to do all these things because no one was teaching that stuff, you know, where I was at. Nowhere, you know, where I grew up, everybody, you'd say After Effects and people would say, what is that? You know, like no one knew what that was. And so the same thing happened with Lottie. Is like I jumped onto it, just dove completely cannonballed right into the deep end of that and said, like, let's figure out how to make this work. Let's push it to its limit.
So this is a very interesting story for me because I, of course, didn't grow up in this era. I was straight into YouTube, and whatever information I wanted, Google and YouTube was there. So when I listen to these conversations, I love hearing about how the world worked, you know, back before all of this, you know, cloud technology was here, right? And that's what I want to segue into the next question of, like, you know, I would love for you to talk about the collaborative effect of it, because of course, you know, LottieFiles is integrated with After Effects, which of course, if you, like you said, learned After Effects, then it wouldn't be too hard to add on the motion design piece of LottieFiles. But you know, from talking to designers, a large portion of the value prop for them was being able to collaborate with their team members, being able to share these collaborative items with shareholders, whether they're a project manager or an investor, whatever the case may be. So I would love for you to talk about the evolution of collaboration and how that's affected your journey and your career, if you could.
Yeah, totally. I mean, when I was previously working, we had a team of like 4 people, and we collaborated pretty well. Like, someone was illustrating, someone was doing a layout design, and I was doing like motion and animation, and we always like had this collaborative like conversations always going. And I think it's just being able to collaborate with people and being able to like play off each other's strengths is such something you couldn't have done, right? Like I can work with anybody now. I could work with somebody out of Europe. I can work with somebody out of China and on a project and collaborate in those ways. And it's insane to think about, like you were saying, like before, you know, it's like, who's down the street? That's who you've got to work with. And so, but now it's like you've been able to build. It's like you kind of get to build this team like a superhero team, you know, like the Avengers. You get to kind of go like Nick Fury on things, like it's a simple, like who's good at this, who's good at that. And I think collaboration and working with After Effects and working with Lottie and like being able to bridge those gaps, you know, with different people and different teams, and like you said, sharing files, sharing ideas. One thing is that I think works really well with Lottie is it's universal. Like you can apply it, in apps, you can apply it on website and things, platforms that need or can display movement. It's almost, if it can't be a Lottie, you can make it a GIF, or something. But it's been one of those things of like it goes pretty far, and it does, these amazing things. And just like researching and learning about how it was integrated and why, like for Airbnb, and like the idea of like we wanted smaller app sizes because that generated more downloads. Like that was that simple, right? And and here we are, right?
Exactly.
that like it's grown so much further than that, and it's done so much, and it's just such a. I hope that answered the question.
It 100% does. So before we dive into what I call like the closing juicy questions that get more into like, mindset and advice and things like that, I want to dive back into the conversation about how you first found out about LottieFiles through Upwork, doing work for clients there, and eventually saw kind of a snowball effect. You're like, okay, it's a reoccurring theme that, they want some type of animation within the work that they're paying me for, right? So if you could talk about a specific story or a specific project or a design challenge where LottieFiles played that pivotal role, or if you could share an example of a time where you're like, okay, like we built this amazing thing, and without motion, without LottieFiles, like it probably wouldn't have got done as well as it got done.
I think the website that we built for that, the gaming studio, really hit. I mean, until like they went back and like redone it, because one of the guys left, so it doesn't live anymore online. But it was something that really kind of hit for the specific period, like 3 years ago, 2 years ago, or more than 2 years ago. And Lottie played a pivotal, role in that, because it absolutely like couldn't have been done, with gifts. It couldn't have been done. The website load would have just been in such a slog. And all the website that we've done, that I did when I was working for TaxFile, that's all the animation on there, LottieFiles. And that, it again wouldn't have worked had we not done it as Lottie's. It was the right time and right place, like. And I don't know if this is too much, but it's like, I think that like animation and doing stuff with like Lottie and other things like that, it legitimizes products and ideas, right? Because like if you go to a website and you're not sure about it, but you see, interface height is animated, you see icons are animated, you see character animation through it, and you're like, well, they must be really, on top of things, whatever client I've worked with before, they've always come back and like had great feedback about like how the animations just really kicked it up a notch. I've worked with designers that are like, I just love seeing my illustrations or my designs actually moving. You've given them life in such a way that like they were just so static, and they were like, I can't even look at these static graphics anymore. I have to look at them as animations, and what you've done with them has just been, beyond what I ever thought you could do with something like that. And I think that's what's been so amazing about working with the product and working with what they've done.
Yeah. And I think to, bring a conclusion to your point, it helps tell the story better, right?
Yeah.
Like I didn't really, again, going back to what we were talking about before, I didn't really understand how intimate user interface and user experience was until you realize like, oh, when you like something on Twitter, like that's Lottie. Or, oh, when you're scrolling through Airbnb and you get a confirmation and there's like sparkles and stuff like that, like that's a Lottie. And when you talk about, it may seem small to people, but when you're talking about choosing one app versus the other, like you just said, or whether it's a website or an app, you're probably going to go with the one that builds more trust by telling that better story there. So I 100% agree.
And it's hidden, right? Like you don't think about it. It's like knowing how, like, what the expectation of the reaction would be to clicking like the heart on something, right? Clicking the like button. Like you don't think about like that as an animation, but it's the feedback that you get and that satisfaction by pressing that thing that it just reinforces like what you're doing, and it gives like, you know, immediate feedback to you that you've done something. And it's such a subtle, hidden, like kind of Wizard of Ozing of a design. And I think animations is like the next level. Like you got all these websites out there that are currently just static, but like having like movement on certain things, like a shopping cart, you click it, an app, you click it, and it's that feedback. I think that really what pushes, you know, design and pushes everything forward.
Exactly. So I wanted to go back to what we were talking about with these trends, right? Because I think
Mhm.
that's extremely important in this space. Because obviously, if you had the same skill set and were using the same tools from 10 years ago in an open and fair market, you'd be out of a job, you
Oh
know.
yeah.
So obviously, you have to stay competitive. So in this ever evolving field of design, how do you stay updated and continue to improve your skills? Because obviously you have communities now and you may have mentors and things like that. But for you, you know, Irby specifically, how are you staying up to date? How are you improving your skills? And how are you staying competitive in an ever evolving industry?
I I just watch a lot of things. You know, look at a lot of things. I'm currently playing like Marvel Snap right now on my phone, and I'm looking at like just the interface animation in that, right? Like just the animation of it's a card game, but there's so much animation involved in the game, and it's insane. Like just, and so I'll like sometimes I'll screen record it and I'll play it back and I'll kind of watch it, and I just study like what this thing is doing. And I think to myself, like, you're looking at a rectangle and you're enthralled by it because it's moving or doing something.
Yeah.
And like, you know, my brain just is always on. It's like, how would I do that as a Lottie? How would I do that as a video? How would I use that in some way? And I'm always like kind of gathering like little snippet of breadcrumbs from other little things. Watch a ton of people's reels. They'll post them on Reddit like frequently. And I just look at like a lot of the stuff that people are doing, and I see, and I'll say, oh wow, that person, you know, they've got some really awesome text animation, you know, topography animation. I think it's amazing. Or they've got like really cool character animation, or, and I've seen a lot of people that are like trying to figure it out, right? Like they're trying to like, how do I go forward with my reel? What am I looking at? You know, and then as I've gone further and further and further through the years, I've been able to say like, okay, that's, you know, less tutorial, more original, right? And that's generally feedback. And it's always good to, you know, I'll go on YouTube and I'll see a tutorial and I'll just watch it. And, but I try not to, I just try to say like, okay, what did I learn from that? I'm not going to just take this and just use it. I'm not going to take it and like make my own, you know, just replicate it, because, you know, it's not really, you know, but like, how do I, oh, that was something I didn't know you can do in After Effects, right? Like,
Mhm.
and being able to admit, like, I think there's like some hubris to it, right? Like being able to like admit you don't know everything is great, right? Like being able to look at something and go like, oh, they did it this way and did it a totally different way for a totally different application for totally different like aspect of what I would have done it for. And it's like, oh, I learned something new today. And just
Mhm.
being able to like go to it that way. Like I said, like I said earlier when we were talking, I do watch a lot of cartoons, so I'm always looking at like character animations. I follow a lot of creators on Instagram. That's kind of like where I see a lot of
Mhm.
really fun stuff. And it's, and you know, you'll get the little scroll where it's generated based on what you've liked or looked at, and I
Never
see,
ending.
yeah, it's never ending, and I see a lot of illustration on there, or I see a lot of animation on there, and I'm like, man, that's really cool, and I'll save it. You know, I'll save a lot of stuff. So I have a little bucket, 2023. Next year will be 2024. Everything I saved from that year, and I kind of look at it, and then, you know, and I just research design trends. You know, like I'll just do a simple Google search: the design trends 2023, design trends 2024, and I'll look at like what's going on, and I'll like look at what people are doing, and, you know, always just like, okay, that's like what the next thing is, right? Like,
Mhm.
you know, 2 years ago it was like iridescent shapes being sold as crypto something or whatever. And then now you don't really see that anymore because like that kind of era is already ended. It, you know, crashes and burns, you know, and you know, it's just like just staying on top of those things, looking at like those cool things. And I always just say like, okay, I see something cool. Let me try it in that way. Let me try to do something like that. And just giving yourself those personal projects and those personal challenges. I think that really helps, honestly. I mean, you don't have to always have like a client come to you and say like you need something, but you know, life gets busy too, and you can't always just like sit down and animate. So sometimes just researching and keeping your brain invested, keeping your ideas invested in just bookmarking, saving, looking, researching. That always helps.
I really appreciate the applicability of what you just said of right
Yeah.
because everybody has Instagram at this point, you know.
Yeah.
We've all got Instagram, we've all got YouTube, and it's a matter of, and this is what I really appreciate about what you're saying is it's a matter of, you know, being kind of like an apprentice, right, or being an observer instead of casting judgment and saying, because it's very easy, I would assume, for someone in your shoes to be like, that's not how it's been done over the last few years or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't, you know, make sense or whatever. But to be here today as what we would consider a veteran and saying like, no, I can still learn from everything that's going on is absolutely incredible. And just having that as a skill and as a mindset is going to help people improve their careers far beyond. So I want to touch on that emerging trends though. So because now we're getting to the point to where we got to give some people advice. We got to give them some value bombs. So, you know, based on what you're seeing today, because obviously this is a part of your life. This is something you enjoy doing. So this is kind of passive to you. What emerging trends or technologies do you think are currently shaping the design field, and how should or could designers adapt to stay relevant to that?
I mean, the biggest one's the scariest one, right? Everybody's scared of AI right at the moment, right? Like everybody's like, is this going to take everybody's jobs? Is this going to do this? And, you know, and I kind of, maybe in 30 years, maybe in 40 years, who knows? Maybe tomorrow. I think that AI is just a really, really complex Google search at the moment. I mean, it's scraping the internet. It scrapes the internet for, you know, you type in a watermelon bouncing on a trampoline, photorealistic, it's going to find some stock image of a watermelon. It's going to find some stock image of a trampoline. It's just kind of doing kind of this like kind of bridge work for you. Is that bad? That's not for me to say. But what I do really love about AI is if I'm trying to think of something, you know, and I can't find it in Google search, I can go kind of like, you know, I need a singing taco, you know, and an illustration wearing red shoes in New York City, right? Like it's going to give me some kind of interesting, unique illustration, and it might get my brain to go, okay, that idea visually looked better in my head than it does when I see it kind of laid out. And I think it just helps speed up the creative process, right? I think it helps speed up for designers and artists. Like maybe that idea would be interesting to explore. Maybe, you know, like I always kept a sketchbook when I was in school, right? It's just like a visual kind of, I kind of treat it as a visual sketchbook of like, this is an idea I thought of, this is something I can think of, and I can kind of, I've seen some stuff that's really scary. Like I was like, how did it know exactly? Oh, excuse me, we might have to edit that. How did it know exactly how or what I was thinking? I mean, I typed in something yesterday and it pulled up something and I was like, that's scary.
Yeah.
Like, that's scary accurate, exactly what I was looking for. And it was just crazy. I mean, and it's not perfect, right? Like you don't take that thing and just go straight to production with it, but it can help you generate ideas. When it comes to animation, everybody's scared of like animation, AI animating things right now. And if you look at it, okay, that's cool. You got something moving, but it's just like it's like one of those crypto things. They all look the same, and it all looks exactly the same, and it all eventually you realize like what you're seeing, yeah, it's cool, and it's exciting that you got something moving. Because I think that's kind of the thing for people, is like getting something to move is such a hurdle that if they can sidestep it or find a quicker way to get it going or get it done, it's really exciting, and they're very excited about it, and as they should be. But I think at the same time, it's like also recognizing that it looks like 1,000 other things. I've seen a music video someone did, like half of it was like AI video, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's cool, but like it looks like 5,000 other versions of this I've just saw like over this past year, and it doesn't look beyond what it is. And I think that's where I think you'll always need designers, you'll always need like artists to be able to put their actual hand into it, because everybody comes with their own background. They always come with their own unique life experiences, and they've all come with their own like who they are or what they've seen or what they are interested in. And when they can take these ideas and apply them, I think that's where you really start to see like really strong and interesting like art or design or animation or whatever it is. And so I think, it's embracing it, right? Like just knowing how to use it, knowing how far you can push it, and knowing that like not to be scared of it, because it may not be here in a few years, or it may be here for the rest of our lives, like Google searches, right? But like it's before this, what were people doing? They go to Google image search, taco in New York with red shoes, and they would look to see what they could find as closely matching to that. And all this is doing is just taking it to that next step of what you would do, which was download like an image of New York, an image of a taco, an image of red shoes, and photoshopping that together crappily. It's kind of doing that for you. And then you're kind of like, okay, now I'm left with this thing. And it's kind of just taking out that one step of the longer step process of what design is. This longer step of the creative process. It's taking just a step. And it helps you along the way. And I've seen a lot of people actually use it successfully to make expressions for After Effects. I think that's been one of the things that I've really embraced, is like, write me an expression for this, and it's pretty close. You might have to tweak a thing or here or two, but I think that's also been like a really fun aspect of it, because it can generate something that like a Google search couldn't do.
Yeah.
So it's kind of you never know what you're going to get. But just being aware of it, and just being able to play with it, and being not so intimidated, but also at the same time not, shrugging it off, right? Like if you're on the boat with all the other people that are moving forward, and you're always taking on different pieces of cargo, and or you could be in the little ducky boat back there, just like, I'm going to do my own thing, if that makes sense. I'm always using weird metaphors.
Yeah, no, these are great metaphors. And, I think at the end of the day, this is just another tool to add to your toolkit, right? Like maybe don't become overly dependent on it, but also you don't want to end up, 3, 5, 10 years down the line and having completely ignored it. And now it's one of the main tools, like, the next After Effects or something like that. Not saying that, AI is going to develop that fast, but who knows, right? But that's why we're asking the question, is because, I'm assuming a lot of people want to kind of dig into your mind and understand, like, okay, how does this person that's essentially a veteran in the space, how is he keeping up with all of this stuff? How is he determining what software to use, what software to test out, and, what software to completely cut off the chopping block, because it's maybe not going to be a trend or something like that. So,
and just it helps, right? But it's not the end of it. Like if you were to take and say, like, I need a portrait of somebody in Greece, and you printed that photograph out, like, you really didn't do anything. You really didn't. There's nothing you did there. You just typed a prompt in, and that's like, and I equate that to this essentiality of, like, if you were just to print off a Google image surface someone else's image and claim it as your own. There's a lot of copyright issues going on with this right now. And so I think we're still in that waters of, like, not knowing what it's going to look like. How's it going to work? Is it eventually going to become to the point where it's not scraping images from the internet and it's generating its own content, its own original content? Now that's when it's going to get interesting, right? Because then your prompt, you will never find that unique image ever again, right? Because you'll be that one-time generation of that. And that's the part that's like, when's it going to get to that? Is it ever going to get to that? Is it true AI, or is it just really, really, really complex searching, you know? And I think that's where we're kind of in that middle road, right? Like at the beginning of the internet.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen. Is it going to be a .com boost, an AI boom, or boost? Not boost.
Bust.
Bust. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's going to be awesome to see play out, right? Like, you know, as of today, we're recording this November 10th, 2023. We have no clue if somebody's going to listen to this November 10th, 2025 or 2035 or whatever the case may be. So it'll definitely be interesting to come back and listen to this. So we've only got a few questions left, and I think these are some of the great ones as well. So, you know, we talked about a lot. We talked about the actual design piece. We talked about some career things. We talked about, you know, teams and collaboration, and maybe, you know, business, like how to actually get a client and, you know, things like that. But if you had to create a course, your ideal course, right? What would you talk about, and what would that course be about?
So this is a very interesting question, because I think it's like, it goes in a multitude of different ways. I've actually kind of wanted to start this, but I just haven't had the time to do it yet. Now I'm got kind of a lot of the time to do it. So I'm going to try to start this. But when I wanted to learn Blender, I went to YouTube and I said, how do I do Blender? And I didn't know anything about it. And I'd see 1,000 different tutorials, but I saw, and maybe we have the like Blender Donuts. I looked at the Blender Donuts tutorial from the Blender Guru, as he calls himself. And I can't think of his name.
Blender Guru.
Oh man, Andrew Price. I'm sorry, Andrew Price, the Blender Guru. He made how do I make a donut in Blender, and it's not just like making a circular kind of like cone or like a whatever you call it, the shape, but it's like how do you use every single tool for the most part inside of Blender to generate something like this. So you're doing texture mapping, you're doing kind of particle generation, you're doing all of the lighting, and he takes you from this what is just like what starts out as this very simple shape to this very complex kind of end result. And for me, I was like, oh man, this is, I mean, I sat through the whole series. It was like, you know, several hours long, and it was free. It was amazing. It was in depth. It was really well done. And I was like, I learned a lot from that. I learned how to use Blender from that one tutorial, and I would watch another tutorial on something else, and I was like, oh, I remember that from the Blender, from the donut. I remember that from the donuts. Oh, this is a different way to do it from the donuts. And then you get in there, and you're like, okay, now I see something, and I'm like, okay, I've got like an airbrush, right? How do I render that in Blender, right? How do I figure out how to make this thing? And you start challenging yourself to like, okay, I'm not going to look up how to do this. I'm going to just figure out how to do it like from the stuff I've learned. And that's the kind of thing I would want to make as a like kind of a series of like with Lottie, right? Like, so I have some illustrations I have right now, and I want to do a series where I go from the illustration, like how I generated the or how I did that, how I illustrated it, how do I set it up in Illustrator, how do I bring it from Illustrator to After Effects, and then how do I animate it, and then how do I do it in a way that like I can export that as a Lottie file, and how do I go to Lottie and then use it there and deploy it. And I think that would be a really, for me, I think from everything I've seen for the past several years of the forums, it's like, how do I go from point A, B, C, D through Z? And I think a series on just like that entire process, just slow, meticulous, like Andrew Price did, like with the donut. Mine would be something else, not a donut. It could be a donut, but like, how do we go from point A to point B with this and get an end result? I think that would be such a really intriguing series. I say intriguing, it would be me talking. I don't know how intriguing that would be, but but I think it would be like really beneficial for the community to be able to see how to do this from all these steps and where all the little hidden things are, right? Like there's all these little hidden features, all these little hidden things you can and can't do, and how do we kind of take that animation process? And it would help people maybe with After Effects, and might help people like figure out how to do Lottie, and it might help people like with Illustrator. And I think it would hit kind of a multitude of steps of that, and that would be something I think it would be very fun. It's just the time right now. I just got to get the time on a weekend to sit down and kind of do that. It's like, you know, you got to block out all this time. It's like 8 hours, and you can figure it out. You know, that how that goes.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by the evolution of education, and I think we're going through an education revolution, actually, right? But from our time with traditional institutions, go to high school, go to college, get a job, and kind of do your thing. But I think that because of the internet, education is changing, right? If I can pay $500 to go to Irby's course and spend 3 months going through the course, and after that I can get a full-time job paying $50,000 a year or whatever the market rate is. Why would I go to college or something like that? So I think what you're saying is extremely valid. I think if you did do it, you probably have a really big audience, because people want to learn from somebody that's not just a professor of design, but has actually, designed something. So
and as a teacher, and I worked in the university system, and it's behind. YouTube's 10 years ahead, right? Like they embrace remote learning for half a semester, and then they gave up on it. And some institutions didn't, but almost all of them gave up on it. They completely gave up on it and gave up on the idea of that, and they wanted to go back to their traditional in the classroom kind of learning experience. And I think that's why they're static and they're stale, right? You go to school, learn how to do programming, you're wasting your time. Go do a boot camp. You're 18, you know a little bit about computers, you want a 6-figure salary job, and your parents telling you to go to college, learn how to do programming. No, go to a big city where they're doing a boot camp for 6 weeks or a month or whatever that time period is, and pay an absolute 16th of the fraction of tuition and all that stuff, and learn how to do programming current this year's programming, right? Like programming that's happening now, not 10 years ago that the schools are still trying to get caught up on. And go out and actually get a job doing 6 figures. Build your own app, right? Like there's ones that you're building your own app, and next thing you know, you're halfway through building an app, and you're at an interview. You're like, yeah, I'm building an app, blah blah blah. And they're like, okay, well, you're hired, right?
Yeah.
Here's 6-figure salary. Work on our app that we're doing, and go work at it, remotely. You're at a beach, and that's your job, right? Like, and I think that like the education system in this country is, like you said, it's a revolution happening, because stuff like YouTube and these online school of motion, all these other things that are out there, like Domestika and things like that, those things are offering up something that people can't get. They're getting specialized, exact education on something they want to learn now. They don't want to go through 3 semesters of college before they get to the class that they want to actually be there for, or 3 years or 2 years. They want to get that information today, because they may not want to pursue it any further. This may be the spark that ignites them to propel like a rocket ship off of the planet to whatever ideas they want. There's stuff to go to university for traditional stuff, like, you want to be a lawyer, you're not going to a boot camp. You want to be a doctor, you're not going to a boot camp. But if you want to be a designer, an animator, you want to be a programmer, things like that, things that are going to be in the need, like a programmer specifically in the future, like there's no reason to go to school for that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I kind of get on my soapbox about it, but I used to be there, and I fully embrace the idea of education online, and I think education on demand is something that a lot of people aren't embracing.
Education on demand. I love that. And no, this is this is why I appreciate you for being so open. I appreciate you for touching on so many things, because there's genuinely people out there that are probably thinking about these, and they may not have the community or, whatever the case may be, but they come across this podcast and I'm like, wow, like Irby's, he knows what I'm going through. So
yeah.
we'll finish.
And I went there because I went to school because because at the time there was nothing for me. Right. But if I was 18 right now and I was in high school, and if you're listening to this and you're in your early 20s, don't go to college. You've got an entire studio in your hand right here. You can get rig systems. You got education systems right there. Like, you can learn how to do things and you can figure it out. There are people online that will help you and guide you through that period, through those things, so you're making your own content. there's absolutely, like it's insanity, that's the old school, right? That's the old school mentality. Go to school, right? You'll figure it out. No, figure it out now. Do it now. Why wait? Life is short.
Yeah, it's as of 2023, right? You'd be much rather, or you'd be way better off spending 4 years building a portfolio than to
Mhm.
spend 4 years at a traditional institution trying to learn how to build a portfolio.
Well, and
So,
even then, the portfolio you're building is stuff that your teacher's guiding you on, and it's
yep.
how much of it is original work and how much of it is project work you're doing in the classroom. It's
Mhm.
the equivalent of doing 10 tutorials on YouTube and putting it into a reel, right? Like that's fine for when you're starting, but you need to do better and do your own original work. And there's no reason to go to 4 years of university for that when you could spend 4 months learning how to do the stuff and then even continue to build better reels and better work and better design work, and,
Yeah.
and keep pushing.
And I feel like a lot of the learning, before we get into this, the final question, the question of all questions, but I feel like
Ultimate
a lot
question.
of the ultimate question, yeah, I feel like a good portion of that learning comes from, like you were saying, when you have to figure out how to render the, what was it, air compressor, and then
Yeah.
you just start playing around with stuff, and through the process of playing around with stuff and figuring out, okay, that's not how you do that, but that is how you do that, and then
Mhm.
that's how you learn, these tools and these softwares, and you become better at it. So
I would
um
get halfway through a project in Blender sometimes, and I was like, I hate where this is going, but I need something over here off the side. I'm going to focus on that and just build on this. And it actually, like, that's ended up what I ended up doing. And sometimes I do the same thing with illustration. I'll do 2 or 3 illustrations, and then I'm like, these are awful. And then I'll do like a third and fourth one. I'm like, I love these, because it's like you've got to make some bad stuff. You've got to make
mhm,
some bad work before you get to the good work.
gotta put the
And
reps
and
in.
and it can be super, and that's the thing about being, is you can be, it can be super devastating to like make something and it just not be what you want, and that's okay though, right?
Mhm,
Because it's, make it again and keep making it and keep making it till you get what you want. And if maybe it's not something, maybe you're in the middle of that process and like you're like, oh wow, this other idea came out, right? And just always being ready to
mhm.
accept those ideas. And
Yeah.
you know sorry.
No, this is great. So you've given us so much advice today, and I think there's going to be so many value nuggets from people that are at different points of their journey that are really gonna, take some advice from this. So let's finish it off with some advice, right?
Okay.
Let's say you're talking to your younger self in 2023, or you're essentially talking to the next generation of designers.
Mhm.
Like I've said, you've already given us a ton of advice, but if you had to pick something that you haven't already talked about before, in today's day and age, to your younger self or to the next generation of designers, what advice do you have for them?
Always keep building, like always keep making, right? Like you're this is something that I think, this is when I would teach art history, and people look at a Rembrandt or a Caravaggio or something like that and they're like, how did they do that? How did Johann Vermeer make these beautiful paintings that are
Mm,
just what they are, right? They're just amazing paintings. And then you research it and you learn about it, and like my class was always about like kind of taking the piss out of them, which is they they cheated, right?
wow.
They cheated on what they're doing. They would use lens-based technology. Before cameras even existed, they had lenses, and they would use projection-based systems or camera obscuras, or these big giant rooms with a little pinhole in it that would project an image into it. That's how Vermeer was doing it. They called Vermeer's camera because he would build these room-sized cameras, and he would set up a scene, and the light would come through this tiny little hole and this obscura, and it would project onto the wall. And that's how he was getting exact, accurate, one-to-one, perfect perspective and perfect proportions. And Caravaggio and all these other painters were using some kind of technology. And all the people, and I didn't think about this because I thought about this when I was teaching, because all the painters I went to graduate school, or not all of them, but a lot of them, they were projecting. They would design something on their computer, right?
Hmm.
Like in Photoshop, they take photographs and design and do all these things. And they project it onto a canvas. And I always kind of thought about that. And some people would say, oh, that's cheating or whatever. I'm like, no, that's brilliant. Because that's, as I got older and I did more research, because that's what Caravaggio, that's what Vermeer, that's what all these painters were doing, right? They were using the technology at hand, AI or whatever, to make the work that they're making. And it's where, like, you walk through a museum and you see people, they go to the Renaissance era, they go to that era, and they go, these are just amazing and beautiful, and I could never do this. I can never do this. I hear that all the time. I can never do this. You go sit in a museum and just look at people, and they'll be like, I could never do this. I can only draw stick figures. But guess what? I don't, like, they know how to, yes, they have brilliant paintings. I'm not trying to discredit any of that. They're amazing, amazing techniques, amazing work. They had to know how to use paint. They had to know how to use technology. They had to know how to use technology. And that was kind of the key thing, is they use the technology at hand to make amazing paintings, amazing works of art. Our problem with education in this country is that we are so intimidated by those works of art as creatives that we don't allow ourselves the opportunity to even strive for that high level of output. And when you go and research and you go and learn and you educate yourself on these things, you learn, oh, well, then it's not like I'm saying they're tracing, but essentially, like you got this kind of underlying drawing, you've got this kind of studying, and then they knew how to use paint. They knew how to use thin layers of paint. They knew how to do varnishes and washes and all these other different little techniques, but they knew how to set things up, and they knew how to use lighting, and they knew how to use just the technology. And that, if I was able to go back and tell myself about that, I would probably blow my mind away, because I would always talk myself out of doing things. I would always talk myself out of doing things because I didn't have this, I didn't have that, I didn't have that. If you go back, Kevin Smith's movie Clerks, it's a brilliant, exact how to make movie, right? Like, if you, the whole thing about that is he sold his entire comic book collection to get the money together with his friends to make this movie. He had a good script. That's it, right? Good script, knew how to use the technology, and use the technology that was available to him, right? He didn't go out and buy, the biggest movie camera on the planet, which was what I, as an 18-year-old, thought you had to make a movie, right? He went and said, I'm going to make a movie, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it with what I have. And now he's famous for that, right? And I think I would have told myself to embrace that idea. And I would tell, kids to embrace this idea of what you have in your pocket, right? You can make content. And subsequently, as I've kind of talked to myself in the past over years, I've allowed myself, go shoot a music video for this band and do it, and edit the music video and do it, right? Because you can do it. And I said, okay, I can do this, right? I stopped telling myself I can't do it, and I said, I can do it, And that's what I would kind of tell everybody out there, is like, you can do these things. It's going to be hard, and it's going to be stressful, and it's going to be, your first one's going to suck. And your first illustration is going to suck. Your first animations are going to be horrible. Your first reel is going to be extremely bad, and that's okay. If you just accept that that's what it was in 20, whatever year it is, and you're going to make a new one next year, and you're going to keep making, and you're going to keep making, and just to keep making, and don't be intimidated by it, because every single person, even those people that you admire that are at that top tier, at the top level, even they still feel the same way, right? Like, they're, maybe, and I can't speak for everybody, but I can speak for myself. Like,
but they have to start somewhere,
They had to start somewhere.
Yep.
They had access to technology, and they knew how to use it, right? And just like Picasso, still like an artist.
Yeah, gotta give some snaps there, because that was some great poetry. So we're going to close this one out. So let's close it out with some action items, some calls to actions for everybody.
Okay.
So where can listeners follow up with you at? So social medias and things like that. And also, how can listeners support you?
Well, you can find me on Facebook, Irby Pace. If you search my name, there's only one of me, which is one of the fun things about having this unique name, is you search for it, you're going to find me. You can find me on LinkedIn under Irby Pace. On Instagram, I am Irby Face, because I accidentally deleted my account a long time ago with Irby Pace, and I did Irby Pace. It was a nickname someone gave me, so F-A-C-E. Oh, and I guess I should spell it for listeners, but like IRBYPACE. It's first and last name there. You can find me on my website is irbypace.com, and my email is listed on there. And you can support me by sharing my work or liking work on Instagram, or just reaching out. I mean, just hearing from people, and like it's such an awesome thing. Just knowing that like I've reached a few people here or there, or been able to like inspire or something like that. That's always fun. And if you know anybody hiring, that's also very fun too.
Of course. Awesome. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and post those down in the description as well when we post it. That way everybody can just kind of click and go. So awesome. So that's going to close this one out. So Irby, I really appreciate you for taking time out of your Friday here. So taking time out of your Friday to come talk with us, talk with our community, and sharing your story. And like I said, I'm sure there's tons of value nuggets dropped there that I'm sure people will identify with. So if you see people messaging you on Facebook or Instagram after we post it, that's why. So
yeah, definitely reach out, definitely ask questions, send me messages. I think I have a TikTok also. I think it's the same, Irby Pace. And I'm pretty sure the only one I don't think I have is Twitter right now. That's the only one I don't have. So.
Yeah. Apparently Twitter's X now, so that's also
our X, whatever it is now.
The evolution of technology. The name has changed too.
Yeah, so. It's still Twitter.com, not X.com, but whatever.
So awesome. So yeah, of course this is recorded because you're listening on Spotify or Apple or YouTube or wherever you're listening. But my name is Austin. I am one of the community managers and partnership managers here at LottieFiles, and I have been your host today for this episode of Lottie Spaces. And we will see you on the next one.